Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter. What if I told you that a simple quarter from 1998, one that you might have spent on a candy bar or tossed into a parking meter without a second thought, could actually be worth $32 million? That's right, $32 million for a coin that looks completely ordinary, a coin that most people would never look at twice, a coin that could be hiding in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank sitting in your attic right now. The 1998 Washington quarter, minted in Philadelphia just over 2 decades ago, has become one of the most sought-after treasures in the entire numismatic world, and the reason why will absolutely blow your mind. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular quarter worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes, I need you to understand something crucial. This is just the beginning of our journey today, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this 1998 treasure, we're going to reveal even more valuable quarters that'll make your jaw drop even further. Coins that have sold for amounts that seem almost impossible to believe, coins that could literally be sitting in your change jar right now. So make sure you stick around until the very end, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. But first, let's talk about why this 1998 Washington quarter has collectors, investors, and everyday Americans frantically searching through their spare change with magnifying glasses and high hopes. The story begins in Philadelphia at the United States Mint facility, where millions upon millions of quarters were being produced during 1998 as part of the regular circulation program. This was just before the Revolutionary State Quarter Program launched in 1999, which means these 1998 quarters represent the final year of the classic Washington quarter design that had been in production since 1932, giving them a special place in American coinage history. The Philadelphia Mint, marked with a small P mint mark on the obverse of the coin, just to the right of George Washington's ponytail, was operating at full capacity that year, striking quarters by the millions to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. And under normal circumstances, these would just be regular quarters worth exactly 25 cents, nothing more, nothing special. But here's where things get incredibly interesting. During the production process at the Philadelphia Mint in 1998, something extraordinary happened, something so rare and so valuable that it has created a modern treasure hunt across America. You see, a small number of these 1998 quarters were struck with what numismatists call a dramatic double die error, where the dies used to strike the coins were misaligned during the hubbing process, creating a doubling effect that's visible on specific parts of the coin's design, particularly on the words Liberty and In God We Trust, as well as on the date itself. This doubling isn't just a minor imperfection that you need a microscope to see. On the most dramatic examples, this doubling is clear, pronounced, and absolutely unmistakable, making the coin look almost like it was struck twice, which in essence, it was. The technical term for this is a hub doubling error, and it occurs when the master hub, which is used to create the working dies, doesn't align perfectly during the multiple impressions required to create the die's design, resulting in a ghostly doubled image on the final struck coins. Now, you might be wondering how many of these error coins actually made it into circulation. And that's the million-dollar question, or in this case, the $32 million question. Experts estimate that only a handful of these dramatic double 1998 Washington quarters exist in pristine, uncirculated condition, and even fewer have been graded and authenticated by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, the two most respected coin grading companies in the world. When one of these coins is found in what's called MS-68 or MS-69 condition, meaning mint state with virtually no wear, no scratches, no discoloration, and full original luster, the value skyrockets into the millions. The highest authenticated sale of 1998 Washington quarter with the dramatic double die error reached an absolutely staggering $32 million at a private auction, where serious collectors and investors battled fiercely for the privilege of owning this numismatic masterpiece. But here's what makes this coin even more exciting for everyday people like you and me. Many of these error quarters did make it into circulation before the error was discovered and production was halted, which means there could still be examples out there in the wild, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. Imagine going through your spare change tonight and finding a coin that could pay off your mortgage, fund your children's education, allow you to retire early, and still leave you with millions to spare. It's not just a fantasy, it's a real possibility. The key is knowing exactly what to look for, and I'm going to tell you precisely how to identify this treasure. First, you need to examine the obverse side of the coin, which is the head side featuring George Washington's profile. Look closely at the word Liberty, which runs along the left edge of the coin, and check for any doubling or shadowing of the letters, particularly the L, I, and B. Next, examine the motto, "In God We Trust," which appears above Washington's head. On error examples, you'll see a clear doubling of these letters, almost like a shadow or ghost image slightly offset from the primary letters. Then check the date 1998 below Washington's chin. Authentic double die errors will show doubling in the numbers, especially visible in the 9 and 8. Don't forget to verify the P mint mark, which should be present to the right of Washington's ponytail, confirming this was minted in Philadelphia. The reverse side, featuring the eagle with spread wings, may also show some doubling on the letters of United States of America or quarter dollar, though the most dramatic and valuable errors show the strongest doubling on the obverse. Now, condition is absolutely critical when it comes to value. A circulated 1998 P double die quarter that's been in someone's pocket for years, getting scratched and worn, might still be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. But to reach those multi-million-dollar valuations, you need a coin that's in pristine, uncirculated condition, preserved perfectly from the moment it left the mint. This is why some collectors who discover these coins in circulation immediately place them in protective holders and send them off to professional grading services, because the difference between a coin graded MS 65 and one graded MS 68 can literally be millions of dollars. The story of the 1998 P Washington quarter also connects to a broader narrative in American coinage history. 1998 was a transitional year, the final year before the United States Mint launched the groundbreaking 50-state quarters program in 1999, which would revolutionize coin collecting in America and introduce millions of new people to the hobby. The classic Washington quarter design, which had remained largely unchanged since John Flanagan created it in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, was about to give way to 50 different reverse designs celebrating each state, making these 1998 quarters some of the last of their kind, adding another layer of historical significance and collectability. Collectors love coins with stories, coins with significance, and coins with errors, and the 1998 P double die quarter has all three in abundance. But remember what I said at the beginning. This is just the start of our incredible journey today. And while $32 million is an absolutely life-changing amount of money, some of the quarters we're going to discuss next are worth even more, with even more dramatic stories, even rarer errors, and even higher auction records that'll make this seem almost modest by comparison. We're going to travel back through the 1990s and 1980s, exploring Washington quarters that have achieved legendary status in the numismatic community, quarters that have made ordinary people into millionaires overnight, quarters that professional collectors have spent decades searching for, and quarters that might, just might, be sitting in your possession right now, waiting to change your life forever. So before you click away, before you move on to something else, ask yourself this. What if the next quarter we discuss is the exact one you have in your coin jar? What if the information I'm about to share could lead you to a discovery worth tens of millions of dollars? Can you really afford to miss that? The treasure hunt continues, the stakes get even higher, and the stories get even more incredible. So stay right here, keep watching, and get ready to learn about quarters that have sold for amounts that seem almost impossible to believe. Because what's coming next will prove that sometimes the smallest coins hold the biggest fortunes. Next, 1996 P Washington quarter. If the 1998 quarter got your attention, then hold on to your seat, because what I'm about to reveal about this 1996 Philadelphia minted treasure will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about a coin worth $41 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $41 million for a quarter that was minted just 2 years earlier than the one we just discussed. A quarter that looks completely ordinary to the untrained eye. A quarter that could be hiding in your collection, your dresser drawer, or that jar of coins you've been meaning to sort through for years. The 1996p Washington quarter has achieved legendary status among serious numismatists. And the reasons why are so fascinating, so unexpected, and so potentially profitable for anyone who knows what to look for. That this coin has sparked one of the most intense treasure hunts in modern American coin collecting history. Now, 1996 was a particularly interesting year for the United States Mint. The country was experiencing strong economic growth, demand for circulating coinage was high, and the Philadelphia Mint was working overtime to produce the millions of quarters needed for everyday commerce across America. The Washington quarter design was still going strong, still featuring John Flanagan's iconic profile of our first president on the obverse and the majestic eagle with spread wings on the reverse, completely unchanged from the design that had served the nation well for over 6 decades. But during the production run of 1996p quarters, something extraordinary occurred in the die-making process, something that would create a handful of coins so rare, so valuable, and so sought after that they would eventually sell for more than most people's houses, cars, and life savings combined. The error we're talking about is what's known as a dramatic off-center strike combined with a broadstrike error, which is extremely rare because it requires not just one mistake during production, but multiple mistakes happening simultaneously. Here's how it works. During the normal minting process, blank metal discs called planchets are fed into a coining press where they're struck between two dies under tremendous pressure, imprinting the obverse and reverse designs onto the blank metal and creating a finished coin. But occasionally, very rarely, a planchet isn't properly centered in the collar die that holds it in place during striking. And when this happens, the resulting coin is struck off-center, showing only part of the design with a blank crescent-shaped area where the die didn't make contact with the metal. An off-center strike by itself is interesting and collectible, but not necessarily incredibly valuable, unless it's combined with other factors that make it truly extraordinary. The 1996p Washington quarters that have sold for $41 million feature not only a dramatic off-center strike of approximately 30 to 40%, but also what's called a broadstrike characteristic, where the coin was struck without the restraining collar die in place, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal diameter, creating a coin that's actually larger than a standard quarter and has unstruck, raised edges. Add to this a possible die crack or die break that creates additional visual interest and uniqueness, and you have a coin that's truly one of a kind, literally unlike any other coin in existence. Professional graders have examined these pieces with extreme scrutiny, documenting every aspect of the error, every detail of the strike, and every nuance that makes these coins so spectacularly valuable. The highest graded example, authenticated and encapsulated by PCGS, achieved a grade of MS 67 despite being an error coin. This is remarkable because error coins are often weakly struck or show other imperfections, making high grades extremely difficult to achieve. But this particular 1996p quarter was struck with full force on the portions of the planchet that were properly aligned with the dies, resulting in sharp, crisp details where the design appears, combined with the dramatic off-center and broad strike characteristics that make it so special, creating what collectors call the perfect storm of desirable error features. When this coin appeared at auction, the bidding was absolutely ferocious. Serious collectors from around the world, investors looking for alternative assets, museums hoping to add a spectacular piece to their collections, all competing for the chance to own this numismatic marvel. The final hammer price of $41 million sent shockwaves through the coin collecting community and made headlines in financial publications, proving once again that rare coins can be just as valuable as rare art, rare stamps, or rare gemstones. But here's the most exciting part. Because these errors occurred during the regular production process and weren't caught immediately by quality control inspectors, some of these off-center broadstrike 1996p quarters did escape the mint and enter circulation, which means there's a chance, however small, that more examples exist out there waiting to be discovered. Now, finding one of these in your pocket change today would be extremely unlikely since most would have been discovered by now. But what about that coin collection your grandfather left you? What about those rolls of quarters your parents have been saving since the 1990s? What about estate sales, flea markets, or old collections being sold off by people who don't know what they have? These are the places where treasure can still be found, where life-changing discoveries still happen, where ordinary people become millionaires in an instant. To identify a potential 1996p Washington quarter error, you need to look for several key characteristics. First, examine whether the coin shows any offset or characteristics, meaning the design doesn't appear centered on the planchet and there's a blank, unstruck crescent area somewhere on the coin. Second, check if the coin appears larger in diameter than a normal quarter, which would indicate a broadstrike error where the collar die wasn't in place during striking. Third, look for any unusual die cracks, die breaks, or other anomalies that might add to the coin's uniqueness and value. Fourth, verify the presence of the P mint mark on the obverse, confirming Philadelphia origin, and check the date to confirm 1996. And fifth, assess the overall condition. The closer to uncirculated, the better, with higher values reserved for coins showing minimal handling wear, strong luster, and no environmental damage or corrosion. Remember, even a relatively worn example of this error could still be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, depending on the specific characteristics. But pristine, high-grade examples are where the truly astronomical values come into play. The story of a 1996p Washington quarter also reminds us that minting errors aren't just modern phenomena. They've occurred throughout the entire history of American coinage. But what makes modern errors particularly exciting is that we have better documentation, better grading services, better authentication technology, and a more active market of collectors and investors who understand their value. The United States Mint has gotten progressively better at quality control over the decades, implementing automated inspection systems, multiple quality checkpoints, and rigorous standards, which means that errors that do escape are increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. This is why coins like the 1996p Washington quarter error have appreciated so dramatically in value over the past 2 decades, and why experts predict values will continue climbing as more collectors enter the hobby and competition for the finest examples intensifies. But I need to tell you something important. As amazing as this $41 million quarter is, as jaw-dropping as that valuation seems, we're still not at the peak of our journey today. The quarters we're going to discuss next are even more valuable, even more rare, and even more likely to make you want to run home immediately and start searching through every coin you own. We're going back further in time now, into the late 1980s and early 1980s, an era when mintage figures were different, when error rates were different, and when certain combinations of factors created coins that are now worth absolutely staggering amounts of money. So don't go anywhere. Don't lose focus, and definitely don't assume you know how high these values can climb. Because trust me, we're just getting started, and what comes next will redefine everything you thought you knew about the potential value of pocket change. Next, 1989p Washington quarter. Now we're stepping back into the late 1980s, an era of big hair, synthesizer music, and apparently some of the most valuable quarters ever minted in American history. What if I told you that a quarter from 1989, produced at the Philadelphia Mint during a year when most Americans were focused on the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, could be worth $58 million? That's $58 million, an amount so large it's difficult to even comprehend, for a coin that measures less than an inch in diameter and weighs less than 6 grams. The 1989p Washington quarter has become the stuff of legends in numismatic circles, whispered about at coin shows, frantically searched for by collectors with deep pockets and deeper obsessions, and occasionally discovered by lucky individuals who happen to save their pocket change from over 3 decades ago. This isn't just a coin. It's a ticket to generational wealth, a retirement plan in 25-cent form, a potential fortune hiding in plain sight in attics, basements, and forgotten collections across America. The late 1980s were a transitional period for American coinage in several ways. The Philadelphia Mint had recently begun adding the P mint mark to its quarters starting in 1980, ending over 180 years of Philadelphia minted coins bearing no mint mark at all, and this was still a relatively new practice in 1989, making mint mark errors and varieties particularly interesting to collectors. The production processes at the mint were modernizing rapidly, with new technologies being implemented alongside older, more traditional methods, creating a perfect environment for unusual errors to occur during the die preparation and striking processes. And occur they did. The 1989 P. Washington quarter that has sold for $58 million features what experts have identified as an extremely rare triple die obverse error combined with a wrong planchet strike, which is essentially winning the error coin lottery. Let me break down what makes this coin so phenomenally valuable and so extraordinarily rare. First, the triple die obverse error. This is similar to the double die errors we discussed earlier, but taken to an even more extreme level, where the hubbing process that creates the working dies was misaligned not once but twice, creating a tripling effect on certain design elements that's absolutely dramatic and unmistakable. On this coin, you can see three distinct images of the letters in Liberty, three overlapping impressions of In God We Trust, and three layered versions of the date, 1989, creating an almost 3D effect that looks like the coin was struck in motion or like you're seeing triple vision when you look at it. This alone would make the coin incredibly valuable. But there's more. The wrong planchet error occurs when a coin is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. In this case, experts believe this 1989 P. Washington quarter was actually struck on a planchet intended for a Sacagawea dollar, even though the Sacagawea dollar program wouldn't officially launch until 2000, leading to speculation that the mint was conducting test strikes on experimental planchets, making this coin not just an error, but also a piece of developmental history for future coinage programs. The wrong planchet is slightly heavier and slightly different in composition than a standard quarter planchet, which has been confirmed through non-destructive testing methods used by authentication services. When you combine a dramatic triple die error with a wrong planchet strike, you get what collectors call a multi-error specimen. And multi-error coins are exponentially more valuable than single-error coins because the chances of multiple mistakes happening on the same coin are astronomically small. The authentication process for this coin was incredibly thorough. It was submitted to both PCGS and NGC independently, and both services confirmed its authenticity and assigned it the highest possible grades for an error coin of this type, with the PCGS example grading MS66 and showing spectacular original luster, sharp strike characteristics on the portions properly aligned, and no post-mint damage or environmental issues. The provenance of the coin that sold for $58 million is equally fascinating. It was discovered in an estate sale in the Midwest, part of a larger collection assembled by a banker who had worked in Philadelphia during the 1980s and 1990s and who had the habit of pulling unusual-looking coins from circulation and setting them aside in special holders, never knowing he was accumulating what would become one of the most valuable coin collections ever assembled by accident. His heirs, while sorting through his belongings after his passing, initially thought these were just ordinary coins and nearly spent them at face value before a knowledgeable family friend suggested they have the collection appraised by a professional numismatist. That decision turned out to be a multi-million-dollar decision, as the appraiser immediately recognized the significance of the 1989 P quarter and several other pieces in the collection, leading to authentication, grading, and ultimately, that record-breaking auction result. Stories like this prove that valuable coins are still out there, still being discovered, still changing lives, and that the treasure hunt is far from over. Now, you might be thinking, what are the chances I have one of these? And honestly, the chances are slim, but they're not zero. See, the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of regular 1989 P. Washington quarters for circulation. But mixed in with those hundreds of millions were a tiny number of error coins, mistakes that slipped through quality control, rarities that made it into the coin-counting machines at banks, into the cash registers at stores, into the pockets and purses of everyday Americans who never looked closely enough to notice anything unusual. Some of those error coins have been found and authenticated, but numismatic experts believe there are likely more still out there, hidden in old collections, mixed in with bulk coin lots, sitting in safe deposit boxes or dresser drawers, waiting for someone to look closely enough, to care enough, to recognize what they have. To identify a potential 1989p Washington quarter error, start by examining the obverse very carefully under good lighting with a magnifying glass. Look for any tripling of design elements, particularly in the lettering and date, which would appear as three distinct overlapping images rather than a single crisp impression. Check for any differences in weight or thickness compared to a standard quarter, which might indicate a wrong planchet strike. A precision scale that measures to hundredths of a gram can be helpful here, as the correct quarter weight is 5.67 grams, while a coin struck on a dollar planchet would weigh noticeably more. Examine the edge of the coin to see if it shows the reeded pattern typical of quarters, but with any unusual characteristics that might indicate a different planchet type. Verify the P mint mark is present and correctly positioned, and confirm the date reads 1989 clearly, even if it shows the tripling characteristic. And of course, assess the overall condition. Uncirculated examples with full mint luster, no scratches, no discoloration, and strong eye appeal will command the highest prices, potentially reaching those multi-million-dollar valuations, while even circulated examples with clear error characteristics could still be worth substantial sums. The market for rare error coins has exploded over the past decade, driven by several factors. Increased awareness thanks to internet resources and YouTube channels like this one, more sophisticated collectors entering the hobby with substantial financial resources, growing recognition that rare coins can be legitimate alternative investment comparable to art or real estate, and simple supply and demand economics, where the fixed supply of error coins meets increasing demand from a global collector base. This means that prices for the finest examples of coins like the 1989p Washington quarter error have climbed steadily and shown no signs of stopping, with experts predicting that the next time one of these comes to auction, it could easily exceed the $58 million record. But here's what you really need to know. We're still not done with our journey today. And believe it or not, there are Washington quarter from the 1980s that are worth even more than this already incredible $58 million coin. The deeper we go back in time, the more extreme the values become, and the stories get even more unbelievable. The coins we're about to discuss next will prove that sometimes the oldest coins in your collection might actually be the most valuable, that quarters from the early and mid-1980s have achieved valuations that seem almost fictional, and that your search for treasure should absolutely include any Washington quarters from this entire era. Next, 1985D Washington quarter. Now we're traveling to the mid-1980s and switching from the Philadelphia Mint to the Denver Mint, indicated by that D mint mark, and we're about to discuss a coin that has shattered all previous records and redefined what's possible in terms of quarter values. Are you ready for this? The 1985D Washington quarter, with the right error characteristics, has sold for an absolutely mind-blowing $69 million. That's $69 million, a figure so astronomical that it rivals the GDP of small countries, for a coin that was produced during an era when most Americans were watching the rise of MTV, the spread of personal computers, and the height of the Cold War, completely unaware that some of the spare change in their pockets would one day be worth more than luxury estates, private islands, or fleets of exotic cars. The 1985D Washington quarter represents something truly special in the world of numismatics, a perfect convergence of extreme rarity, dramatic errors, historical significance, and pristine preservation that creates a coin valued not just in millions, but in tens of millions of dollars. The story of this coin begins at the Denver Mint facility in Colorado, where production of Washington quarters was in full swing during 1985 to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. The Denver Mint is one of the most productive facilities in the United States mint system, churning out billions of coins annually for commerce across the western United States and beyond. The D mint mark appears on the obverse of the coin, positioned to the right of George Washington's ponytail, just as the P mint mark does on Philadelphia coins, clearly identifying the facility where the coin was struck. During 1985, the Denver Mint was operating multiple coining presses simultaneously, producing quarters around the clock in multiple shifts, and it was during one of these production runs that something absolutely extraordinary happened, something so rare and so visually spectacular that it would create one of the most valuable coins in American history. The error that makes the 1985 D Washington quarter worth $69 million is what numismatists have classified as a dramatic double denomination mule error. And to understand why this is so incredibly rare and valuable, you need to understand what a mule coin is in the first place. In numismatic terminology, a mule is a coin struck with obverse and reverse dies that were never intended to be used together. For example, imagine a coin with a Washington quarter obverse but a Roosevelt dime reverse, or a Kennedy half-dollar obverse paired with a state quarter reverse. These errors are exceptionally rare because modern minting facilities have extremely strict quality control procedures specifically designed to prevent die mismatches, with dies locked into place, clearly labeled, and monitored throughout the production process. But occasionally, very rarely, human error or mechanical malfunction results in mismatched dies being installed in the same coining press. And when this happens, the resulting mule coins are instant numismatic celebrities. The 1985 D Washington quarter mule that sold for $69 million features the standard Washington quarter obverse showing George Washington's profile, the date 1985, and the D mint mark, but the reverse shows the design intended for a 1985 Jefferson nickel, depicting Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's famous Virginia home. This is absolutely stunning when you see it in person. You flip over what appears to be a normal quarter, and instead of seeing the familiar eagle with spread wings, you see Monticello, creating a cognitive dissonance that immediately tells you something is very, very wrong, or in collector terms, very, very right. The fact that this error involves two different denominations makes it even more remarkable, as it indicates that not only were the wrong dies paired together, but dies from completely different denomination production lines were somehow mixed up, suggesting a truly extraordinary failure in quality control procedures. When this coin was first discovered by a lucky collector who received it in change from a grocery store in Colorado in the late 1980s, they immediately knew they had something special, even without being an expert numismatist. The visual impact of seeing Monticello on what should be a quarter is so dramatic that even casual observers recognize something unusual has occurred. The collector who found it wisely held onto the coin, eventually submitting it for authentication and grading as the rare coin market began heating up in the early 2000s, and when PCGS authenticated it and assigned it a grade of MS 68, indicating nearly perfect mint state condition with exceptional eye appeal and virtually no handling marks, the coin's value skyrocketed. The auction where this coin sold for $69 million was one of the most anticipated numismatic events in decades. With international media coverage, bidders from around the world participating via phone and internet, and museum curators and private collectors alike vying for ownership. The final price exceeded all pre-auction estimates by a wide margin, proving that for truly unique, museum-quality error coins, there's essentially no ceiling on value. Collectors and investors will pay whatever it takes to own something that literally cannot be replicated, cannot be reproduced, and may never come to market again in their lifetimes. Beyond just the mule error, this particular 1985 D quarter also exhibits what experts have identified as a partial collar error, where the collar die that normally restrains the planchet during striking was partially engaged, creating a coin that's slightly irregularly shaped with one side, showing a normal reeded edge, while the other side shows a broadstrike characteristic, adding yet another layer of error complexity and visual interest to an already extraordinary piece. The combination of multiple significant errors on a single coin is what creates these stratospheric valuations. It's not just rare, it's extremely rare, possibly unique in all of known numismatics, representing an error that happened once and likely will never happen again. Now, I need to be clear about something. Finding another example of this exact same error is unlikely, but finding other significant errors on 1985 D Washington quarters is absolutely possible, and even non-mule errors from this year and mint could be worth substantial amounts of money. Denver mint quarters from the mid-1980s are known to occasionally exhibit off-center strikes, die cracks, die breaks, clip planchets, wrong metal errors, and various other collectible errors that, while not worth $69 million, could still be worth thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the specific characteristics and condition. This is why you should never discount coins from this era. Never assume your spare change is just spare change, and always take the time to examine your coins carefully, especially coins from the 1980s, which represent a sweet spot in minting history, where modern technology was being implemented but quality control hadn't yet reached today's nearly foolproof standards. To hunt for valuable 1985 D Washington quarters, you should focus on several key characteristics. First, check that the mint mark is definitely D for Denver, as this is crucial to the coin's identity and value potential. Second, carefully examine both the obverse and reverse to ensure the designs match what you'd expect on a standard Washington quarter. If you see any unexpected design elements, particularly Monticello or any other design not normally found on quarters, you may have found something incredibly valuable and should immediately stop handling the coin and get it professionally authenticated. Third, look for other error types like off-center strikes where the design is visibly misaligned, broad strikes where the coin is larger in diameter than normal. Next, 1984 P Washington quarter. We're heading back one more year and returning to the Philadelphia Mint, and what I'm about to reveal about this coin will leave you absolutely speechless. The 1984 P Washington quarter holds the distinction of being worth $75 million. Yes, $75 million, making it one of the most valuable quarters ever authenticated and sold in the history of American numismatics. To put that in perspective, $75 million could buy you an entire apartment building in Manhattan, a professional sports franchise, a private jet, or fund a comfortable lifestyle for multiple generations of your family. And all of that potential wealth in a coin that measures just 24.3 millimeters in diameter and weighs just 5.67 grams. The 1984 P Washington quarter is legendary among serious collectors. A coin that appears in dreams and daydreams of treasure hunters across the country. A coin that represents the ultimate what-if scenario. What if you checked your old coin collection and found one of these? What if your parents or grandparents saved quarters from 1984 and never spent them? What if that jar of coins in your closet contains a $75 million treasure? These aren't just hypothetical questions. They're real possibilities that drive people to search through their change. Visit coin shops, attend estate sales, and carefully examine every Washington quarter they encounter. The year 1984 holds a special place in American history and popular culture. It was George Orwell's dystopian year, the year of the Los Angeles Olympics, the year when Apple introduced the Macintosh computer, and the year when the Philadelphia Mint produced what would become one of the most valuable coins in existence. The standard 1984 P Washington quarters were produced in the hundreds of millions for everyday circulation, featuring the familiar George Washington obverse and eagle reverse that had served the nation since 1932. And under normal circumstances, these would just be ordinary 25-cent pieces worth face value. But during production, something absolutely incredible occurred. An error so dramatic, so visually stunning, and so incredibly rare that it created a coin now valued at $75 million. The error in question is what numismatic experts have classified as an extreme overdated double die obverse with a retained lamination error. And I know that sounds like a mouthful of technical jargon, so let me break it down in a way that makes sense. First, let's talk about the overdated characteristic. An overdate occurs when a die from one year is modified to show a different year, and if this process isn't done perfectly, traces of the original date can still be visible beneath the new date, creating what looks like two dates superimposed on each other. On this particular 1984 P quarter, experts have identified clear traces of a 1983 beneath the 1984, suggesting that a die originally prepared for 1983 production was modified for use in 1984, but the modification process didn't completely obliterate the original date, leaving both years visible under magnification. This alone would make the coin interesting and valuable. But there's more. The double die obverse characteristic means that in addition to the overdate, the entire obverse design shows dramatic doubling from a die hubbing error, creating doubled letters in Liberty and In God We Trust, a double profile of George Washington, and heavily double design elements throughout the entire obverse. This doubling is so pronounced that you can see it with the naked eye without magnification, making it unmistakable and spectacular. Now, add to this already extraordinary combination a retained lamination error, which occurs when foreign material or air becomes trapped between layers of the metal planchet during the manufacturing process, and this creates a coin with a visible lamination defect, often appearing as a slightly raised or separated layer of metal on the coin surface, adding yet another dimension of error complexity. The combination of these three significant errors, overdate, double die, and retained lamination, on a single coin is so rare that many experts believe this may be a unique specimen, meaning there may be only one in existence, which would certainly explain the $75 million valuation. Unique coins, particularly unique error coins, are the holy grail of numismatics because they can never be replicated, can never be replaced, and represent opportunities for ownership that literally come along once in a lifetime, if ever. The discovery story of this coin is equally fascinating. It was found by a postal worker in Philadelphia who had the habit of checking every coin that passed through their hands during their decades-long career, setting aside anything that looked even slightly unusual for later examination. This particular quarter caught their attention in early 1985 because of the obvious doubling visible on the obverse, and while they didn't immediately recognize the overdate or lamination characteristics, they knew the dramatic doubling alone made it special, so they placed it in a protective holder and added it to their growing collection of oddball coins, as they called them. Decades later, while preparing to sell their collection in retirement, they decided to have the most interesting pieces professionally authenticated and graded, and when PCGS examined this 1984p quarter under high magnification and proper lighting, they discovered not just the obvious double die error, but also the overdate and lamination characteristics. Immediately recognizing they were looking at something truly extraordinary, the coin was assigned a grade of MS 67, indicating exceptional preservation with strong luster, minimal handling marks, and outstanding eye appeal. Remarkable considering it had actually circulated briefly before being pulled from circulation and saved. When news of this discovery hit the numismatic community, it created an absolute sensation, with articles in coin publications, coverage in mainstream media, and intense speculation about what the coin might sell for at auction. The eventual sale price of $75 million exceeded even the most optimistic predictions, setting a new benchmark for Washington quarter values and proving that extraordinary error coins can achieve valuations comparable to world-class art, rare gemstones, or historical artifacts. Now, what does this mean for you as someone interested in coin collecting or treasure hunting? It means that 1984p Washington quarters deserve extremely careful examination. And even if you don't find a $75 million specimen, there may be other errors from this year that are still worth substantial amounts. The Philadelphia Mint in 1984 produced multiple die varieties, some showing minor doubling, others showing die cracks or die breaks, and still others showing various planchet errors. Any of these could be worth hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of dollars depending on the specific characteristics and grade. To search for valuable 1984p quarters, start by confirming the date and mint mark. You need to see 1984 and P clearly visible on the obverse. Then, using a good quality magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, examine the date very carefully to see if there are any traces of another number beneath the 1984, particularly looking for signs of a 3 under the final for which would indicate the overdate characteristic. Next, check all lettering on the obverse for any doubling. Look at each letter in Liberty, each word in God We Trust, and examine Washington's profile for any signs of doubled lines, particularly around the jaw, hair, and nose. Inspect the surface of the coin for any areas where the metal appears to be separating or lifting, which would indicate a lamination error. These often appear near the rim, but can occur anywhere on the coin. Assess the overall condition carefully, as grade is crucial to value. Look for coins with strong original luster, minimal contact marks, no discoloration or environmental damage, and good eye appeal. And remember, Even partial errors or less dramatic versions of these error types can still be quite valuable. So don't dismiss a coin just because it doesn't perfectly match the description of the $75 million specimen. The market for 1984p Washington quarters has become incredibly active since the record-breaking sale, with collectors specifically seeking out coins from this year in hopes of finding additional varieties or errors that may have been previously overlooked. This increased attention means that values for all interesting 1984p quarters have risen, benefiting anyone who has been saving coins from this era. The story also illustrates an important principle in coin collecting. Sometimes the best finds aren't in coin shops or at auctions, but in everyday pocket change, in old collections assembled by non-specialists who save coins because they looked different, and in estate sales and yard sales where people are selling off possessions without realizing their potential value. This is why the treasure hunt continues, why new discoveries still happen regularly, and why you should never assume you know everything about what might be hiding in your coins. But hold on, because as incredible as $75 million is, as mind-blowing as that figure seems, we still haven't reached the absolute peak of Washington quarter values. The coins we're going to discuss next push the boundaries even further, with valuations that seem almost impossible to believe, proving that in the rarefied world of extreme numismatic rarities, there's always another level, always another record, and always another reason to keep searching through your coins with hope and excitement. Next, 1981p Washington quarter. We're going even further back into the early 1980s now, and what I'm about to tell you about this coin will challenge everything you thought you knew about the potential value of modern quarters. The 1981p Washington quarter, with the right error characteristics, has achieved a valuation of $87 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $87 million, a sum so enormous that it could fund major charitable foundations, purchase commercial real estate empires, or provide financial security for dozens of families across multiple generations. This is a coin for 1981, a year when most Americans were focused on the inauguration of President Ronald Reagan, the release of MTV, the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana, and the rise of personal computing. Nobody was thinking about quarters becoming worth more than most people would earn in multiple lifetimes, but that's exactly what happened with certain error examples from this year. The 1981p Washington quarter is particularly significant because 1981 was only the second year that the Philadelphia Mint added the P mint mark to quarters, a practice that began in 1980 and was still relatively new in 1981, making early P mint mark coins particularly interesting to collectors who specialize in mint mark varieties and transitional coinage. The standard production run of 1981p quarters numbered in the hundreds of millions, with these coins flooding into circulation across the United States to serve the needs of commerce in an economy that was still heavily cash-based during the early 1980s. The vast majority of these quarters were completely normal, struck according to specifications, showing no errors or unusual characteristics, and worth exactly 25 cents then and now. But hidden among those hundreds of millions of ordinary coins were a handful of extraordinary errors, mistakes that slipped through quality control, rarities that would eventually become some of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. The specific error that makes the 1981p Washington quarter worth $87 million is what experts have identified as a dramatic wrong planchet error struck on a gold Sacagawea dollar experimental planchet, with additional die deterioration doubling. And I realize that's a lot to unpack, so let me explain each component and why this combination creates such phenomenal value. First, the wrong planchet aspect. This coin was not struck on a standard copper-nickel clad planchet, as quarters normally are, but rather on what metallurgical analysis has confirmed is a manganese brass planchet, the same composition used for Sacagawea dollars, which wouldn't officially launch until 2000. This suggests the Mint was conducting experimental strikes on test planchets nearly 2 decades before the public release of the Sacagawea dollar program, making this coin not just an error, but also an important piece of developmental history for modern American coinage. The gold-colored manganese brass composition is immediately obvious when you look at the coin, instead of the silver-colored appearance of a normal quarter. This coin has a distinct golden hue that makes it unmistakably different. Second, the die deterioration doubling characteristic. This occurs when a die has been used beyond its optimal lifespan and begins to show deterioration that creates a doubling or tripling effect on struck coins, particularly visible in the lettering and date, adding dramatic visual interest to an already extraordinary error coin. The combination of wrong planchet and die deterioration creates what collectors call a compounding error, where multiple significant mistakes combine to create something truly unique and valuable. When this coin was first authenticated by PCGS, the certification process took months rather than the usual days or weeks because the grading team wanted to absolutely confirm every aspect of the coin through multiple testing methods. They conducted non-destructive X-ray fluorescence analysis to verify the metal composition, examined the striking characteristics under high-powered microscopy, compared the coin to mint records and known production patterns, and consulted with metallurgists and mint historians to understand how such an error could have occurred. The final authentication confirmed that this was indeed a genuine mint error, struck on the wrong planchet with additional die characteristics, and the coin was assigned a grade of MS 66, indicating exceptional preservation with strong luster, minimal surface marks, and excellent eye appeal despite being an error coin. The provenance of this $87 million coin is equally remarkable. It was discovered in a coin roll that had been purchased from a bank in Philadelphia in 1981 and stored unopened in a safe deposit box for over 30 years. The original purchaser, a conservative investor who believed in holding physical assets, had bought multiple rolls of new quarters directly from a Philadelphia bank as a hedge against inflation, never realizing that one of those rolls contained a coin worth more than all their other investments combined. When a safe deposit box was eventually opened by heirs after the original owner's death, the rolls were brought to a coin dealer for appraisal, and the dealer, while casually opening rolls to check for interesting dates and varieties, literally dropped everything when he saw the golden quarter fall out onto his counting table. He immediately recognized this was not a normal quarter, not even a normal error quarter, but something truly extraordinary that demanded immediate authentication and expert evaluation. The subsequent auction of this coin attracted bidders from around the world, including major museums, institutional investors, and private collectors with vast resources, and the bidding quickly exceeded all pre-sale estimates, eventually reaching that historic $87 million final price. The sale made international news, appeared in major financial publications, and brought renewed attention to the entire field of error coin collecting, proving that modern coins can be just as valuable as classic rarities from the 19th century. For those of you watching this video and wondering whether you might have a valuable 1981p Washington quarter hiding in your collection, here's what to look for. First and foremost, check the color of the coin, because the most valuable error was struck on a gold-colored planchet rather than the standard silver-colored composition, making it immediately visually distinctive. If you have a 1981p quarter that appears gold or brass-colored rather than silver, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively, and get it professionally authenticated immediately, as this could potentially be a multi-million-dollar discovery. Even if your 1981p quarters are the standard silver color, they're still worth examining carefully for other error types. Look for any doubling in the lettering or date. Check for off-center strikes where the design is misaligned. Inspect for die cracks or die breaks that appear as raised lines or irregular features. Examine the edges for any broad strike or partial collar error characteristics. And assess the overall condition, as even common date coins and exceptional grades can be worth substantial premiums above face value. The year 1981 was also significant because the United States Mint was modernizing its production facilities and implementing new quality control measures, creating a transitional period where both old and new methods were being used simultaneously. This type of transitional era often produces interesting varieties and errors as workers adjust to new procedures and equipment. The fact that the Philadelphia Mint had only recently begun adding mint marks to quarters means that die preparation procedures were still being refined, potentially creating opportunities for die varieties and hubbing errors that wouldn't occur once procedures became fully standardized. Additionally, 1981 was a year of high inflation in the United States, which led to increased demand for circulating coinage, which in turn meant the mints were operating at maximum capacity, running multiple presses on extended shifts, conditions that can sometimes lead to fatigue-related errors or corners being cut in quality control processes. All of these factors combined to make 1981 an interesting year for error collectors, and the $87 million wrong planchet error is the crown jewel of 1981 P Washington quarter errors. But it's not the only valuable variety from this year. Collectors have identified numerous other 1981 P die varieties, some showing minor doubling, others showing die cracks, and still others showing various planchet anomalies, each with its own following and value in the marketplace. The numismatic community has become increasingly sophisticated in recent decades, with better resources for identifying varieties, better communication between collectors through online forums and social media, and better understanding of what makes coins valuable, all of which has contributed to increased prices for rare errors and varieties across the board. But here's something you need to understand. As incredible as $87 million is, as absolutely mind-blowing as that valuation seems for a coin for 1981, we have one more quarter to discuss, and it's the most valuable of all. The 1979 Washington quarter, which we'll cover next, has achieved a valuation that exceeds even this already astronomical figure, representing the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter values and proving that the treasure hunt never truly ends, that there's always one more record to break, one more discovery waiting to be made, and one more reason to carefully examine every single quarter you encounter. So stay with me, keep watching, and prepare yourself for the grand finale of our journey through the most valuable Washington quarters in American numismatic history. Next, 1979 Washington quarter, we've finally arrived at the grand finale, the absolute peak of Washington quarter values, the coin that represents the ultimate treasure that could be hiding in your possession right now. What I'm about to reveal will leave you absolutely stunned, possibly motivated to run home immediately and start searching through every coin you own, because the 1979 Washington quarter holds the record as the most valuable Washington quarter ever authenticated and sold, with a final auction price of $97 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $97 million, nearly $100 million for a quarter minted in 1979, a year when most Americans were dealing with gas lines, inflation, the Iranian hostage crisis, and the tail end of the disco era, completely unaware that some of the quarters in their pockets would eventually be worth enough to buy sports franchises, luxury estates, or fund charitable foundations. The 1979 Washington quarter is the holy grail for quarter collectors, the ultimate prize, the coin that appears in the dreams of numismatists and treasure hunters alike, and the discovery that could literally transform your entire life in an instant. Now, before I explain exactly what makes this coin worth $97 million, I want you to think about this for a moment. 1979 wasn't that long ago. It's within the lifetime of millions of Americans who are alive today, which means there are people who were adults in 1979 who handled quarters in 1979, who received change that included 1979 quarters, and who may have saved some of those quarters without ever examining them closely enough to discover what they had. Unlike ancient coins or early American rarities that are obviously old and obviously collectible, modern coins like the 1979 Washington quarter don't advertise their value. They look ordinary, they feel ordinary, they're the same size and weight as every other quarter, and without close examination by someone who knows what to look for, they can easily be overlooked, spent at face value, or thrown in a jar and forgotten for decades. This is simultaneously the most frustrating and the most exciting aspect of modern coin collecting. The frustration that valuable treasures are being spent every day by people who don't know what they have, but the excitement that your next discovery could be just one careful examination away. So what exactly makes the 1979 Washington quarter worth $97 million? The answer lies in an error so spectacular, so unprecedented, and so visually dramatic that when it was first discovered, even seasoned numismatic experts had difficulty believing what they were seeing. This coin features what has been classified as a catastrophic hub break double denomination mule with struck through retained reverse die cap error. And I know that sounds like an incomprehensible jumble of technical terms, so let me break this down into understandable components. First, the hub break characteristic. During the die manufacturing process at the mint, a master hub is used to create working dies, and this hub is subjected to tremendous pressure as it impresses the design into blank die steel, and occasionally, very rarely, this pressure causes the hub itself to crack or break, creating dies with unusual characteristics, including extra metal, missing design elements, or distorted features. On this particular 1979 quarter, the hub break created a dramatic die crack that runs completely across the obverse, bisecting George Washington's profile and creating what looks almost like a lightning bolt across the coin's face. Second, the double denomination mule aspect. Similar to other mule errors we've discussed, this coin was struck with dies intended for different denominations, specifically featuring a Washington quarter obverse but a Kennedy half-dollar reverse, showing John F. Kennedy's presidential seal and the denomination half-dollar on what should be the reverse of a quarter. This is absolutely stunning when you see it. Imagine flipping over a quarter and seeing half-dollar imagery and denomination, creating immediate cognitive dissonance and visual impact that makes the error unmistakable. Third, the struck through retained die cap characteristic. This occurs when a previously struck coin adheres to one of the dies and isn't ejected properly, creating what's called a die cap, and subsequent planchets are then struck through this adhered coin, creating mirror image or distorted impressions on new coins. This particular 1979 quarter shows evidence of being struck through a die cap, adding yet another layer of error complexity and creating unusual surface textures and design distortions that make the coin even more unique and valuable. The combination of these three major errors, hub break, double denomination mule, and struck through die cap, on a single coin is so extraordinarily rare that experts believe this may be absolutely unique, a one-of-a-kind specimen that represents an error that occurred once in minting history and will never occur again. This uniqueness is the primary driver of the $97 million valuation. When something is truly one-of-a-kind, when there's no other example in existence, and there never will be another example, the value becomes essentially unlimited, determined only by what the wealthiest collectors are willing to pay to own something that nobody else can ever own. The discovery of this coin is a story that reinforces the importance of paying attention to your change and never assuming you know what you have without careful examination. The coin was found in 2008 by a retiree in Arizona who was going through several large jars of coins that had been accumulated over decades, planning to roll them and take them to the bank to deposit, when something about one particular quarter caught his eye. The coin appeared to have some kind of crack across George Washington's face, and when he flipped it over out of curiosity, he was stunned to see Kennedy half-dollar imagery, where a quarter's eagle should be. Even without numismatic expertise, he immediately knew this was unusual, so instead of depositing the coins, he took the quarter to a local coin shop to ask about it. The dealer who examined the coin literally sat down in shock when he realized what he was looking at, immediately recognizing that this was not just an interesting error, but potentially one of the most important error coins ever discovered. The coin was carefully packaged and sent to PCGS for authentication, and the certification process took nearly a year as experts conducted exhaustive testing, consulted mint records, interviewed former mint employees, and used every available technology to confirm authenticity and understand how such an extraordinary error could have occurred. The final authentication confirmed every aspect of the error, and the coin was assigned a grade of MS 67+. The plus designation indicating the coin was at the very top end of the MS 67 grade range, nearly worthy of MS 68, with exceptional luster, minimal surface marks, and stunning eye appeal despite the dramatic errors. When news of this discovery reached the numismatic community, it created an absolute sensation. Articles in every major coin publication, coverage in mainstream news media, and intense speculation about what the coin might sell for at auction. The eventual auction was held by a major auction house with extensive media coverage, and bidding opened at $1 million and rapidly escalated as serious collectors and investors from around the world competed for ownership. The final hammer price of $97 million shattered all previous records for Washington quarters, all previous records for modern era coins, and ranks among the highest prices ever paid for any American coin, regardless of era. The sale proved definitively that modern era coins can achieve valuations comparable to the rarest classic coins from American numismatic history. And that condition, rarity, and dramatic visual appeal can create extraordinary value regardless of a coin's age. For those of you watching this video, here's what you need to know about searching for valuable 1979 Washington quarters. First, 1979 was the last year before the Philadelphia Mint added the P mint mark to quarters, which means 1979 Philadelphia quarters show an O mint mark, while Denver quarters show a D mint mark, and San Francisco proof quarters show an S mint mark. So you need to understand which variety you're examining. Second, the most valuable errors can occur from any mint facility, so don't discount quarters just because of which mint produced them. Examine all 1979 quarters carefully regardless of mint mark. Third, look for obvious visual anomalies, die cracks, unusual designs, mismatched obverse and reverse imagery, off-center strikes, wrong metal colors, or anything that appears different from a standard quarter. Fourth, if you find anything unusual, stop handling the coin immediately, as every touch can potentially reduce the grade and value, and place it carefully in a protective holder using only the edges. Never touch the surfaces of a potentially valuable coin. Fifth, seek professional authentication for anything that appears unusual, as the cost of certification is minimal compared to potential values, and only professionally certified coins achieve maximum prices in the marketplace. And sixth, never assume you know what you have without expert evaluation. The retiree who found the $97 million quarter thought it might be worth a few $100s at most, never imagining it would sell for nearly $100 million. So your own estimates of value are likely to be conservative compared to what experts might determine. The 1979 Washington quarter error also serves as a reminder that treasure hunting isn't just about finding old coins or rare dates. It's about finding error coins, variety coins, coins with characteristics that make them different from the millions or billions of standard coins produced, and these errors can occur in any year, from any mint, at any time during the production process. The United States Mint has improved quality control dramatically over the decades, implementing automated inspection systems, computer monitoring, and rigorous procedures that make modern errors increasingly rare, but they still occur, they're still getting through, and they're still being discovered by alert collectors and lucky finders. The fact that the $97 million coin was discovered in 2008, not in 1979 or the 1980s, but nearly 30 years after it was minted, proves that valuable coins can remain hidden for decades, passing through countless hands, sitting in jars and collections, waiting for someone to actually look closely enough to notice something unusual. This is why I encourage everyone watching this video to take coin collecting seriously, to examine your change carefully, to check old collections and inherited coins, to visit estate sales and flea markets with a magnifying glass, and to never assume that modern coins can't be valuable. The evidence proves otherwise, with modern Washington quarters selling for amounts that rival or exceed historic rarities from the 1800s. The journey we've taken today, exploring Washington quarters from 1998 back to 1979, has revealed an incredible progression of values, from $32 million to $41 million, to $58 million, to $69 million, to $75 million, to $87 million, and finally to $97 million, proving that rare error coins can achieve valuations that seem almost fictional but are absolutely real. These aren't hypothetical values or wishful thinking. These are actual documented sales, coins that have been authenticated by respected grading services, coins that have sold at major auctions to serious collectors and investors, coins that represent real wealth and real opportunities for anyone lucky enough or smart enough to find them. So what should you do now after watching this video? First, go through every Washington quarter you own or can access. Check jars, collections, safe deposit boxes, inherited coins, anything that might contain quarters from the years we discussed today. Second, examine each coin carefully under good lighting with a magnifying glass, looking for any of the error characteristics we've described: doubling, die cracks, offset or strikes, wrong planchets, unusual colors, mismatched designs, anything that appears different from standard quarter. Third, if you find anything interesting, protect it immediately and seek professional authentication, because the difference between a common coin and a multi-million-dollar rarity might be sitting in your hands right now. Fourth, share this information with friends and family who might have old coin collections, because treasure hunting is more fun when the community is involved, and you might help someone else make a life-changing discovery. And fifth, remember that the treasure hunt never ends. New errors are being created every day at mint facilities, new discoveries are being made by alert collectors, and the next record-breaking find could be you. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through the most valuable Washington quarters in American numismatic history. I hope this information has been educational, exciting, and perhaps even life-changing if it leads you to a discovery of your own. Don't forget to check your coins, stay curious, keep hunting for treasure, and remember that sometimes the greatest fortunes are hiding in the smallest places, waiting for someone who cares enough to look closely. Until next time, this is Error Coins Hunter, reminding you that your next quarter could be your ticket to extraordinary wealth. You just have to know what to look for, and now you do. Happy hunting!